So, back in 1857, a massive rebellion just explodes across northern India, and it shook the British Empire to its very core. Now, some call it a mutiny, but others, they call it the First War of Indian Independence. We're going to unpack the whole story, how it started, why it happened, and the incredible legacy it left behind.
Okay, just picture this. It's May 10th, 1857, in a city called Meerut. The Indian soldiers, who were known as sepoys, suddenly turn on their British officers. They storm the jail, they free their friends, and they start setting buildings on fire. It was this sudden, absolutely violent eruption of anger that was about to spread across the entire subcontinent.
But what on earth could cause a firestorm like that? Well, believe it or not, it all started with a rumor, a single, tiny detail about a new rifle cartridge. And that one detail, it was the spark that was about to ignite a century of simmering anger.
All right, here's our game plan. We're going to look at that initial spark first. Then we'll dive into the decades of discontent that were really the fuel for the fire. We'll follow the uprising itself, figure out why it ultimately failed, and then see how it completely changed the future of India.
Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to start with the immediate cause, that one single incident that really lit the fuse of rebellion.
So the British Army brings in this new weapon, the Enfield rifle. Now, to load it, soldiers had to literally bite off the end of a paper cartridge. Here's the problem. These cartridges were greased, and a rumor starts spreading like wildfire that the grease was made from cow and pig fat. Now, for Hindu sepoys, the cow is sacred, and for Muslim sepoys, the pig is unclean. This was a profound religious insult, and to them, it felt like a direct attack on their faith.
On March 29, 1857, a young sepoy, Mangal Pandey, decides he's had enough. He attacks his British officers at Barrackpore as a protest. And yeah, he was quickly captured and executed. But his act of defiance, it became a powerful rallying cry. He was, in effect, the first martyr of the cause.
Now here's what's really interesting. That spark, the rifle cartridge, it only caught fire because the ground was already soaked in gasoline. For decades, British policies had created this tinderbox of resentment that was just waiting for a match. Let's dig into those long-term causes. Politically, Indian rulers were being pushed out systematically. The British used these policies like the subsidiary alliance system and the doctrine of lapse to just swallow up kingdom after kingdom. Rulers in places like Jhansi and Awadh, they lost their land, their power, their dignity. And this created a whole class of angry, deposed leaders just waiting for a chance at payback.
So, what was this subsidiary alliance thing? Well, it was a pretty clever trap. An Indian ruler would be forced to host British troops for protection, and of course, they had to pay for them. But in reality, it just meant they lost all control over their own military and their foreign policy. It was basically a takeover disguised as a treaty. And on the social and religious side, things were just as tense. You had many British officials who openly looked down on Indians, literally calling them barbarians. Christian missionaries were given a free pass to try and convert people, and traditional customs were openly condemned. Even reforms that might have been well-intentioned, like banning the practice of sati, were seen by many as the British just interfering in their way of life.
So, with all these tensions at a breaking point, that cartridge incident happens and boom, the revolt just spreads like an absolute wildfire. Let's see how this thing builds. I mean, this timeline just shows how fast everything escalated. After Mangal Pandey's protest in March, it all comes to a head in May. When 85 sepoys in Meerut refuse the cartridges, they're publicly shamed and thrown in jail. The very next day, their comrades revolt, break them out of prison, and march straight for the ancient capital, Delhi. Capturing Delhi was a total masterstroke, both strategically and symbolically. They stormed the Red Fort and they proclaimed the old Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, as the leader of their rebellion. All of a sudden, this wasn't just a soldier's mutiny anymore. It was a full-blown uprising with a figurehead, an emperor to rally the people. And for a little while, it seemed like the rebels might actually win this thing. They captured major cities like Lucknow, Kanpur, and Jhansi. So what went wrong? How did this incredibly successful rebellion get crushed within a year? Let's break it down. It really boils down to this imbalance of power. The rebels were incredibly brave, but they weren't united. They didn't have a central command or a shared vision for what came next, and they were seriously outgunned. Crucially, the revolt didn't spread everywhere in India, and a lot of Indian rulers and the educated class actually sided with the British. The British, on the other hand, they had a disciplined army, better technology, and a very clear chain of command. The British response was swift, and honestly, it was absolutely ruthless. Cities like Delhi were retaken with immense brutality. Rebels and even civilians who were just suspected of supporting them faced horrific punishments. The whole point of the suppression wasn't just to end the revolt, it was to send a terrifying message to everyone else. So here's the crucial point. Even though it failed, the revolt fundamentally changed the course of Indian history. The British won the war, sure, but they knew things could never, ever be the same again.
So what changed? First off, the British Parliament dissolved the East India Company, the corporation that had been running India for a century. They were out. Rule was transferred directly to the British Crown, which officially kicked off the era of the British Raj. The army was also reorganized to have way more European soldiers, and they changed their policies to be nicer to the Indian princes to make sure they'd stay loyal next time.
But the most profound change wasn't something you could write into law. It was in the Indian mindset. Even though they were defeated on the battlefield, the revolt of 1857 became this powerful, enduring symbol of resistance. It planted the first real seeds of Indian nationalism, and it became an incredible source of inspiration for the freedom fighters who'd come later.
And that leaves us with this huge question. Was the revolt of 1857 just a disorganized mutiny that was always doomed to fail, or was it something more? Was it the first time that people from all these different parts of India came together under one banner to fight for a shared idea of freedom? The answer to that? Well, maybe that's what defines modern India itself.